Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to my YouTube channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as bell notification icon to stay up to date. And please make sure to share your comments in the YouTube in the comments section below. You can also follow us on mindbodyspirit.fm for the audio syndicated podcast. Today's guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is Susan Grau. Susan is an evidential medium. She has incredible intuitive capabilities. She's a fellow near death experiencer, and she's also a best selling author. So, without further ado, we bring on Susan Grau on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Susan Grau, thank you so much for being my honored guest here on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. It's such an honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, Susan, you've been making the rounds. A lot of people that I speak to have really been impacted by your NDE and the current work that you're doing. I know we share mutual colleagues and friends with Anita Morjani, so you came highly recommended to the channel, and I've just been really fanboying off of the work that you're doing. But for viewers who are not maybe familiar with yourself and the work that you're doing, could you just tell us a little bit about the current work, and then we could get into what got you to be this incredible intuitive medium that we know today, an author
Oh,
as well.
thank you for saying that. So I started out, obviously, and I'm sure we're going to tell the story of the NDE and what happened. I don't know if it's now or we're going to say it later, but I started out actually seeing spirits when I remember probably the only thing I remember about being 3.5 was animals would float when they would cross. And that was my normal. I ultimately, was locked in an unplugged freezer in a garage, and when I came back from that, I could see spirits everywhere. As life went forward, I decided that I was gonna help people, so I became an addiction therapist, and I studied grief extensively and became what we call today a grief coach, and I worked in that genre, and I would just know things when I would say things to people. I'd say, "Oh, I know your PTSD is coming from the fact that you revived your grandmother when you were a little boy and you weren't able to save her." And they'd say, "I didn't tell you that." And I go, "Of course you did." And they'd say, "No, I didn't." And so I was hearing it, not knowing where I was hearing it from. And this became very common for me. So they'd go home and tell their mom and then tell their grandmother, and here we go. And, people would come in and ask me, "Can you tell me about my loved one?" And so I decided to start studying. And ultimately, I studied under, Dr. Raymond Moody, not for mediumship, but for a doctorate in divinity. And I studied under James Van Praagh and Lisa Williams and other people that were in this field that were considered good teachers. And they kept coming up to me and saying, "You had a near death experience. You have spirits all around you. Are you using that?" And I'd go, "What?" Because I wouldn't tell people.
Mm.
And from there, just, at my age, you didn't talk about it. It wasn't something you shared, that you saw spirits. And I was seeing them, they'd wake me up, I just died," "and this is what happened, and please tell my loved one." And then I'd hear so and so's brother, sister's friend died, and I'd have the information. And so it started to be so valuable because it was so accurate
Hmm.
and that I knew I wasn't crazy. Because, I think at first you think, maybe I got, something happened in my brain when I crossed. So that's kind of the
Oh.
quick.
Yeah, we share so many parallels, in a sense that we were both infants who had NDEs, which I mean it's certainly out there, but a lot of NDErs that we see are kind of like having them middle of age, in their 40s, 50s, but you had this at such a young age. For
Mm.
yourself, do you remember a life pre-NDE, or how would you say your life changed, after, this incredibly profound, I'm sure as well as traumatic experience, being locked in a freezer?
I think that I don't even know how to answer that because in all honesty, I was so young that I don't know who I would have been without it. I
Mhm,
think that because I always had the abilities, my family had it. It wasn't anything foreign, but as far as the NDE and who I became, I believe that it made me kinder, with more generosity of spirit, more honest, more able to tap into myself, but I lived the human experience, and so my life was just like every other human's, I tried to control everything, I tried to have I grew up with dysfunction, and so I really feel like I'm not certain who I would have been. However, when I hit an age where I understood it, that really understood it, like the metaphors I saw and the things that they were trying to tell me when it made sense, connected to the living, then it changed me. Then it was a metamorphosis I can't even explain. It was like my wings opened up and I started flying and my flying was being a healer for others. I
mm,
didn't even know I was a healer. I didn't
mhm,
understand the correlation. And then as time went on doing the work is when I really got it. And what they were saying to me when I was returning and they said, "You're gonna help a lot of people, but your life will be difficult, and that you'll learn from that will help you help others, or your lessons from that." So, that's how I knew, that, "Oh, this was meant to happen."
mhm.
And even if it was a free will situation, they made good of it.
Yeah. It's very cathartic to get that degree of education and proper information because it seems like that really empowered you to understand this was a phenomenon or mediumistic abilities wasn't just something that you experienced, but other people too. So it seemed like that allowed you to be more empowered and to have a sense of ownership and universality behind your gifts and
Mhm.
experiences.
Absolutely, I think that if I were to look back, I went through the '70s and everything everybody my age went through, but I was always extremely kind,
Mhm,
and I was so what I believe was authentic, not even so when you don't know yourself totally when you're young, it's hard to be authentically authentic, but for the age
mm,
I was so authentic that I think I got beat up a lot. I got bullied and picked on and that kind of thing because I was just out there with love me, just love me. I think I wanted to experience that feeling of love on this planet that I felt on the other side that it's just not here.
mm,
It doesn't exist. You can get close, but you're never quite going to feel that fulfillment of love and intensity of love that you feel there. And so I think I was searching for it. And when in that search, I was authentic, but also very I would call maybe codependent in that authenticity because I wanted to be loved so badly. Just tell me what you need from me and I'll be that, I'll do that. And it took a lot of growth for me to recognize that piece of the lack of authenticity in order to make a shift. So in that way, it changed me dramatically. I
mhm.
don't think I would have seen that, had I not been through that experience. I hope that made sense what I'm trying to say because I knew who I was, but I didn't. I only knew who I was at that age, and isn't that the way it is throughout our whole journey?
Mhm.
Every year that goes by, I'm learning more about me and less about the world, quite
Yeah.
honestly. More about me in relation to the world and spirit and the whole consciousness.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes individually and with other people, um, the power and love that we have could almost be intimidating because we're tapping into things that maybe people run away from. As Marianne Williamson says, it's not that our biggest fear is not that we're inadequate, it's that we're powerful beyond measure. And, our power as a young kid is often told to be suppressed and just um, the coolest thing to do is to be normal and to fit in, to bury that self down, and I couldn't imagine for you what that must have been like, being more aware than maybe your peers are tuned in and having a degree of discernment of these things, and yet like having a degree of radical acceptance where you're like, all right, to survive, it's almost like I need to fit in. But at a certain point to thrive, I need to make sense of these, pieces, to take ownership of myself.
Absolutely, and I think for me, I didn't even though I intuitively knew who someone was, I always wanted to see the best, and so they could come at me over and over again, and it was just an instant forgiveness over and over until I was beat up. I didn't know how to care for myself properly
Mhm,
because I was searching again for that love and that light, and I didn't have a mean bone in my body. And even though I accidentally would do unkind things, not, unbeknownst to me, quite honestly, I was just wanted to understand everyone around me and to give them grace continuously. And I still give grace, but I also know now how to protect myself in that
mhm,
because the world is harsh and, things happen that we don't want to have happen and we have to heal through that.
mhm,
And so, I think for me, it was realizing my value. I didn't know that. I didn't know my value yet. And that came much later in life for me. So I was putting myself in situations that weren't good for me. So or not healthy for me or, that didn't make me happy, doing for others, and I learned, I believe through growth in that experience of having an NDE, I learned how to take care of me. I don't know if I would have learned that the same way at the same pace had I not had that experience.
yeah, and it also seems like a lot of what you went through invigorated you to do the work that you do, and you're able to have a lot more understanding of those that would come into your path, and there's a big, I think, relationship of pain and purpose, and it seems like you're walking that road to the fullest degree. When I'm listening to you, I'm just kind of curious, were you ever self-diagnosed or diagnosed as being an intuitive empath? Because it seems like, you have a definite empath calling card with an intuitive
Mm.
side. I'm just wondering, A, if that's something that you resonate with, and maybe for viewers who are tuning in before we get into, maybe your NDE, what type of, from your own personal and professional experiences, what type of advice or insight would you give towards fellow empaths who may be like fellow Susans who are just so kind and from the heart, might want to make this world a better place, but at times not everyone is at that vibration or takes that the right way? How would you what's a survival toolkit that you've learned, for empaths to not just survive, but to thrive in their lives?
So yes, I've been diagnosed, so to speak, as being an intuitive
Definitely.
empath. I definitely am. I have just a deep love for, you know, the human condition and all the people, all the spirit world, and I'm very tapped in, and I feel everything.
Mhm,
Um, and I would say for me, it became a matter of acceptance that people are right where they're meant to be for their journey, and I'm not to judge that. I may not like it, and I can have discernment. And so I would say to the empaths out there that are feeling things is to honor what you feel immediately. Don't question it, just honor it.
mhm,
And then honor where that person is at, meaning this is where they're meant to be to learn what they need to learn. So if I need to take care of myself and back away, that's okay, but do it with love and grace.
mhm,
Don't judge, but discern. And I've spent my life doing that. So if I'm in the presence of someone that is, let's say they have no spiritual connection at all, and they're just judging everything and being unkind or creating chaos. I go to that place of this is where they need to be for their spiritual growth.
mhm,
I can move away from that and take care of myself, but I don't need to judge it in doing that. Well, the minute I'm judging it, I'm in it.
mhm,
The minute I'm taking a stance of full judgment, not discernment, but judgment, I'm already in the disease of it or the sickness of it because now it's affecting me I'm intertwined with it.
hmm,
So I've learned as an empath to cut the cord and to say, this is where they're at. And I don't have to like where they're at. I don't have to accept it, but I need to honor that spirit's in charge and
mhm,
they know what they're doing to get this person from A to Z. They know what they're doing. And maybe it's that they have to be a monster to get there, or they have to be unkind to get there, or they have to have behaviors that are unacceptable. But I have to trust that spirit will get them where they need to get them. And so I step back and I say, I will honor that. I have a lot of different belief systems than a lot of mediums and intuitives out there. Um, and I've always had a hard time with that, and I made a decision a long time ago to honor where they're at and not say that my way of thinking is better. It's equivalent. It's just I'm where I am in my journey and they are where they are in their journey. There's no right or wrong to that.
Wow. It seems like what you're describing is utilizing this spiritual perspective that understands the school of life versus this egoic mental or psychological perspective which judges, and it seems like that allows you to kind of look at, I don't know, someone who's in first or second grade who's behaving that way. It's like, all right, they need to, that's where they're at, that's where they need to learn. It's not that I'm better being a post, graduate or postdoc. Like, it seems like your soul level
Right.
is at, it's just everyone is fulfilling their own roles and their own development, kind of like a wave of an ocean just unfolding as they were intended to, while falling, standing up, learning lessons. But it also seems like a lot of the non-interference, is helpful because as a society we try to control or to judge, but just allowing people to unfold without getting too interconnected. I loved all that. And empaths, please do listen to those words because that is needed now more than ever, as we know. Um,
Now more than ever. And it's interesting that you were talking about control because when I was there on the other side, it's one of the things they said to me is what you try to control controls you.
mm. What you try to control, it makes a total sense. And it seems like from taking that step back, people are able to hone in on their power and not be so depleted by trying to just influence factors out of our hands. Um, I wanted to just touch base with you regarding a lot of this insight that you're having with the other side. Was that developed during your NDE where you had this connection post NDE? And if you don't mind maybe sharing a little bit about what happened, because as a therapist, I'm sure there may be a double-edged sword with constantly reliving a trauma. So certainly, if you're not comfortable, in discussing it and want to talk about more so of what you were able to experience. But I'm just kind of curious, for viewers as to what you were able to feel, see, and sense, during that NDE, and anything that you'd like to highlight, as well as what that really allowed you to understand about the other side, in this life.
Absolutely. I do want to just touch back on the control part because I want to say this. I tried to control everything in my life. I didn't listen.
Mm,
I did the human work, the human thing. And it took me years to understand what they were saying to me. So I don't want anyone to think out there that if they are trying to control the world around them, because the world's a scary place, that they're doing something wrong. It's just our way of feeling safe sometimes. And for me, that feeling that I was controlling things that I wasn't, that I thought I was, made me feel safe in my journey because I grew up with dysfunction and many empaths do. In fact, most
mhm.
people do.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that that's a commonality in the human condition. So,
Well,
I
thank you
say to
for
people,
sharing that. Yeah.
yeah, I think they need to know that, I too try and still till this day, and I'm not always non-judgmental. I want to say that sometimes I just blow it out of the park, and I go, oh my gosh, now I have to say I was wrong instead of I'm sorry. I don't really like the word I'm sorry. I was wrong. That was wrong with me. And how can I rectify this? How can I make
Mhm.
this right? That's hard to do. And so I still have to do that at times, And so I hope less than more, but I still do. So I want to just say there's no perfection in our journey. If there were, we wouldn't need to be here.
I love
So
it.
we're always in the process of learning. Um, as far as what happened to me on the other side, I was playing with some boys I was playing for. And they said if I wanted to keep playing, I had to get up in the garage and get popsicles. And they opened the garage door, which I couldn't do. I was too little. And I wanted to play so bad, and we weren't allowed in there. And so I didn't recognize, I don't think, prior to 5 that I actually it wasn't plugged in and there were no popsicles. I just ran to the freezer
Mm.
and went in and tried to find the popsicles, and there weren't any. And as I was trying to turn around, because I was facing inward, it was up on its axis and I was facing inward. And when I turned around, tried to turn around to tell them, they sealed the freezer door.
Oh my God.
And and I thought I was in on a game. I was like, "Surely they're not gonna leave me in here." I think I was thinking that, because I was looking around in this dark space going, "They're gonna open this anytime. I
Mm.
know they are." And then I heard the thud of the garage door. And
Oh.
that was the moment where I knew. I don't know how I knew I was in grave danger because I was so young, but I knew. I knew that I was going to, whatever the word we use, die.
Wow.
Um, and I was terrified. And I remember screaming and screaming and screaming. My mother said she heard the sound of, we had a lot of land. So the garage was separated from the house by fencing and land, our whole backyard or side yard. And my mother said she heard the screaming, but she thought it was a cat in heat.
Hmm. Wow.
She said it was that high pitch. And I tell people that's the sound of terror, that high pitch sound. Um, and So I heard, I saw 3 lights, and I heard, "Stop screaming," and I didn't. I just kept screaming. I didn't know what I was experiencing, and then I heard rather firmly, "Susie, stop screaming. We're going to get your mommy." And I kind of felt like they were saying, "But first," but they didn't. And then I was at the bottom. I didn't feel myself being pulled from my body.
Mm.
And I didn't think I saw a tunnel, but I'll explain that to you in a minute with Raymond Moody, Dr. Moody. Um, I felt like I was on the ledge of this, stairwell or stairway, and I was kind of teetering a little bit, and I looked up and I saw this Greco-Roman room, which, of course, I'm giving you the rendition from an older perspective that as a child, I didn't understand that because we take us with us.
Mhm.
So if we're meant to come back, we're going to take us with us, right? And so that we get the thorough understanding in the human condition or the humanness of it, because we're coming back to the human world.
Yeah.
So I was, I thought I need to get to the top of this room. It had an open ceiling and a giant circle, and I knew there was something inside that room that matched that circle. I don't know how, but I did. And the minute I thought those things, I was at the tip of a circle. I was actually teetering on this circle. And I remember thinking, where am I? And I looked down into this, what I called the well. So back to Raymond Moody for just a moment. He said to me, "Did you?" Because I said, "I never saw the tunnel. Maybe I did. This didn't really happen. I never
Mhm.
saw the tunnel." And he said, "Did you ever think that the well was your tunnel?" Whoa.
Mm. Wow.
I was an older adult woman. This was only like 10 years ago. And
Right.
I was in shock because I don't read NDE books very often,
Mhm.
because I don't want it to taint me. So I was
Sure.
in shock when he said it, and it changed the whole landscape of this for
Wow.
me. I understood something that I didn't understand. And once again, and I looked into it and I saw movement and voices, and I was hearing things that I considered prayers.
Hmm.
And I was hearing them say things like the people on Earth plane or other dimensional energies saying, um, please God, don't let my mother die. They just said she had cancer and I don't want her to die. And please God, have my father get me a car. I'm turning 16 and he says no and I want one, things like that, just examples. And they were blending together like one consciousness.
Hmm.
And so I looked over at these lights, which I call my angels. I asked my angels, where am I? And they said, you're in the room of heart's desires.
Mm.
And I know they put questions in me. I said, do you answer all those? And they said, no, Susie. Sometimes what people desire the most isn't good for them.
Wow.
I
Hmm.
didn't like that because my mom would say that to me in
Yeah.
similar words. And just because you want it doesn't mean it's good for you. So I didn't like it. But I felt peaceful. And I I was watching, I don't usually share this part, but I was watching people walking in this room um, of heart's desires, and they were like jello. And that's how I felt. And I said, what do you do? Why are you walking like that? And they said,
Mm.
I'm not used to my ethereal body. They were passing through this room to
Mm.
complete their mission.
Wow.
They were done. And I knew that. And what I saw, and I've shared this a couple times, but what I saw was this giant what pyramid. I want to call it a crystal now being older. I don't think I knew that then, but it was this giant pyramid and I could see movement in it. And I wanted to, and I saw faces and ethereal bodies. And I wanted to reach through this crystal, this pyramid, but I couldn't. And I knew innately, I knew if I could, I wasn't coming back.
Mm. Wow.
And it was really profound for me. So, and I wasn't afraid. There was no fear. It was all love and light. And then I looked out and I saw what I called the yellow brick road because I saw the Wizard of Oz and it made sense to me. It was yellow pavers. And people ask me all the time, how do you remember this so clearly at that age? And I tell them, do you remember the Wizard of Oz? And they go, yeah. And I go, how old were you when you watched it? And they go, oh,
Yeah.
I was like 5. And I go, do you remember the ruby slippers? Yes. Do you remember the witch on the bike? Yes. Do you remember? And they remember because it was impactful.
Mm.
So I was meant to remember. There was a
Yes.
huge impact on me. It was powerful. And I was meant to not forget. Now, do I remember every single detail? Absolutely not. I wish I could. But I remember the impactful parts, the real impactful parts.
Mm.
So I saw this road. I called it the Yellow Brick Road. And on the beginning of the road, there was a pyramid, another
Mm.
pyramid, and it was pavers. And I saw people paving their path, people, like human people. And it was bumpy and crooked and all beaten up. And I saw them drop to their knees and say, for the love of God, please help me. And they were crying. And I was feeling that some sadness over that. And I watched these angels come in and pull the pavers out and put them back to the bottom of the pyramid. And I knew that was their life journey and they had taken it out of balance by pulling from the bottom. And these angels, these beings, went to the top and started pulling these pavers off, and they were recreating themselves. Like I think that's why I knew about past lives
Hmm.
because I saw it recreating like a new life, a new journey, a new choice, free will, new choice. And then I saw them start paving the path, and I said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "We are the pavers. You are not. All you have to do is walk it."
Hmm.
Again, they put these questions in me. I said, "How do you know if you're walking it right?" And they said, "We bless and block everything, but make no mistake through your journey, Susie. You can get through the block battered and bruised at best, or you can shift. And if there's another block, shift again, another one, shift again until you see us paving your path.
Hmm.
What you try to control controls you. What you run from chases you."
Wow.
I've never forgot it. And part of that reason is because I've been there again. And I've also dreamt the journey of what I experienced over and over. So for me, it was put in my brain over and over and over and in my heart. Um, and I didn't really understand what they were saying, but coming back, there's the change. Coming back, I truly understood what it meant to control things and want
Mhm.
to feel safe in my journey. And I flashed into the room of knowledge. People call it the Akashic records. These weren't rooms, they were places, but as a child, they looked like rooms to me. It was another dimensional energy, another level of dimensional energy.
It seems like your
And
dog is agreeing with it.
oh, probably let me close the door and hopefully we will be able to avoid that. And if you still hear it, I can go close the blinds.
Yeah, all good.
Uh, um, So it was, I called it the room of knowledge is what they told me it was. And I saw these, there was nothing virtual when I was little. There was no such thing, but I
Right.
saw these books that I might call virtual coming in front of people. And I was hearing this little girl. This is so interesting. Someone on a show, on a podcast asked me, do you think that was you?
Hmm.
And it was an aha moment. I
Wow.
saw this little girl saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and I can go through it. I can do it. My heart's going to grow and expand, and I'm going to be this little girl there. And this spirit was saying all this. And people were going, well, I'll come in at this time and I'll come at this time. And I could hear the angelic realm or the guides, whoever they were, saying to them, a lot to take on in one lifetime.
Mm.
And they were going, but I can do it. I know it. My soul's going to expand. That's how I learned about soul expansion and why we have
Mm.
difficulties here.
Wow.
Pain is our greatest motivator for change. It
Sure.
expands us more, and it's equal in value to joy. So, because they both teach us something. So they said to me, and I didn't understand that there. That's here. I'm saying that. And so then I said, what's going on? And they said, they're choosing their journey, their next incarnation.
Wow.
And I was stunned because I heard them say to them, well, you do have free will. And they were gone.
Mm. Wow.
And then I saw another group start to come in, and I don't know what I saw after that because I can't remember. I want so badly to remember that part, but I just can't. But I know that I asked them, where did they go? And they said they went to their next incarnation. No idea what they were talking about. About 13 years old, someone said to me, do you believe in reincarnation? And I went, oh, there's that word. And it made sense
Mm.
because it never made sense to me. So ultimately, I know there was other things that happened in between all this, but
Mm.
because there's no time there, so it wasn't like I was there for 5 hours. I don't, but anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours, I was in the freezer, and they believe it's somewhere in between.
Wow.
And then I was in this room called a room of companions, and it was animals.
Hmm.
And then I was outside, and I was in this field of daisies and um, I don't know why that the word left me, the flowers that you blow on and make wishes with.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
white kind of flower. Yeah.
Yeah, dandelions,
Dandelions. Okay. Okay.
dandelions,
Okay.
and
Yep.
I was in this room with the daisies and or this field, and, I was watching the animals, and they were everywhere, and a lot happened there, but the most profound thing that happened before I came back was that I was looking this is really emotional for me. I was looking to my left, and there was this entity on a mountain,
Hmm.
and it was so powerful and so pure love. And I was everything, and I was nothing. I
Hmm.
was perfection in that moment. And I wanted to get up that mountain so bad, and I knew I couldn't. I wasn't meant to. But I felt this ray of love light come
Wow.
at me and just envelop me. It's like nothing you ever feel
Hmm.
here. Nothing. And I think that's what I've always been searching for. And I just felt complete, total bliss, total beauty, total everything. My soul was everything, and yet it was nothing. It was so insignificant. I can't describe it in human words.
Yeah.
And then I looked to my right, and I watched an angel come out, and I remembered looking these directions because I was trying to understand everything, and I still do that when I read. I don't look at people when I'm reading, I look off.
Mm.
And it's a position of not reading their body language, but also it's a position of spirit. It's where I feel connected is when I'm not looking at people. So I always say I'm looking over here, but please don't feel that I'm being rude.
Yeah.
Um, I I then went into this experience of this angelic being floating towards me, and all I could think of is, I want to float. I hope I can float. I'm sure I was, but I didn't know it. And I just wanted to float so bad, and so I knew I was moving back into that humanness feeling,
Mm.
because the next thing I knew, I was next to a river, and they were walking and saying, "It's time for me to return." And we go through water to be and I didn't really understand, I do now, water is so significant.
Mm.
Um, and clair means clear in French,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
water is clear.
Mm.
And flares are the way that, clairsentient is feeling, and
Sure.
claircognizant is knowing that they're around us. And that's really the basis of what happened. And my mother heard your baby's in the freezer like 6 times, but she said 3, but I know she heard it more than that because I
Mm,
was saying it. I could see my mom.
hmm.
I just
Wow.
couldn't get her to listen to me.
Hmm.
And so I know they can see us. We just can't, they can't get us to listen because we're not present in the moment. Life is in session. And if we're present, we can connect. And we forget that we're somehow, some way here. Um, so my mom wasn't present. She was doing something else and she wasn't noticing what was happening around her spiritually. But anyway, she finally listened. And
Hmm.
she said she went out towards the garage and saw the garage door was closed and she knew I couldn't open it. So she was going to turn around and something compelled her. Now, that's what I remember her telling me. I'm not positive, but that's what I recall in her story to me before she died. And she went to the freezer and opened the door and she said she spun me around and I was ashen. My fingertips were blue and my lips were blue. And she said um, she panicked. There were no cell
Hmm.
phones. There were no garage door openers. None of that existed. And she
Hmm.
dropped me, went to go run. I hit my chin, cracked it open, and I still have the scar.
Wow.
And I took a breath.
Mm,
Now that's really, and when I came back from that and got well and felt normal, I could see spirits everywhere. I thought they were the
mm,
boogeyman.
mm. Wow.
I didn't understand.
A lot to unpack, Susan. That was, I've been doing this a while. That, and there's no rewards, no one is better than others, but that has to be one of the more profound, detailed, in-depth NDE encounter I have ever heard in my life from one to another. I am in awe of what you were able to remember and what you're able to experience and how intricately unique it was. Um, there's so much that I wanna ask because, but we have so little time and so much to uncover with your story. I suppose my question for you is, how did you move forward having this? Because I would imagine, there was a lot of trauma, potential resentment against, some of the people that locked you in, combined with this profound experience, and now you're back, as this young child. How did you live for another day? Well, we know we all do, but
Yeah, I
how did
walked
you
in
move
both
forward?
worlds. I walked in
You
both
did.
worlds. I spent my life walking in both worlds. My whole life has been like that.
Mhm,
I'll be talking to my husband and I'll go, "Your mom's here." And he goes, "What?" You know, "What?" "Don't tell me. I don't want to know." And then he'll tell me later, "I saw her walk down the hallway. Why is that? Why did I see that?" I said, "Because you were present and you're with a medium and that's what happens." But I have to say that I had more fear than most children.
mhm. Your
And
trauma
that's
there's a
what
lot of
was created.
immense amount of trauma. My god.
Fear
Um,
of death, fear of not a lack of understanding. People go, "Why would you fear death if you saw that?" Well, because I didn't understand the correlation.
mhm,
And I was afraid my mommy would get locked in a freezer or she would get cancer or she would die. Anytime anyone died, I was fearful that I
mhm,
would lose, because I I didn't understand the connection, but I knew what it meant.
mhm.
And they were going somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's all I could understand. Um, I don't think I had resentment. I had fear of those boys because they did it to me again in a different way. They locked me. It was very simple, but I was in kindergarten with them, and we had bathrooms in our kindergarten room. And the boy that was the instigator
Mm,
was in an older grade, and we had like first kindergarten, first, second, third grade, I think it was, if I remember right. I don't know if third was in there. Anyway, he pushed me into the bathroom, reached in and shut the light out and held the bathroom door.
oh
And
my
that
god.
was more traumatizing to me.
Same kid.
Yeah, yeah, we know
Oh,
how he grew up, right?
my
Uh,
god.
yeah, and he had no guilt. So I think that just going through the journey, I felt a little afraid of stronger people, physically stronger people, and I think I had a fear of men.
Mhm.
So I had those repercussions, and I didn't like to be in any enclosed space. So even recently, I went into an oxygen tank where they do the opposite. I can't think of what it's called, but they take the wind out of you, the air out of you, because it's more healing for your cells. And it was just a test run. And I was really panicking getting in. And it had a big window, big in it. And I still could feel, and when the air started coming out of me, I could feel that I'm in a panic, and then take a breath, you're okay, you're not back there. So I do know it had a very deep effect on me. Um, and it's not a fear of death. I don't fear death. I fear how I'm going to die.
Mhm. And
That's
all
the
that you went
difference for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
And I
with
still
all that you
carry
went
that.
wow. But, and it also seems like there was a great deal of post-traumatic growth that you've had, and I'm wondering for you, did you sense that, like, once you started sharing what happened to you? Because I mean, sometimes that could, re-traumatize us if it's difficult, but I'm wondering, do you feel like you've been able to be a victor of your story instead of
Yeah.
maybe a
So
victim of your
interesting.
story? And I'm wondering, like, what allowed you to really take ownership of this incredibly traumatizing, trying, difficult crisis and traumatic event that you endured?
A truth time. I didn't become victorious over it until I wrote my book.
Mhm.
That
Well,
was when I went through the dark night of the soul.
wow.
That was when it all came flooding in, and the feelings and the emotions and
Mhm,
the growth and
mhm,
the, empowerment that I never realized I wasn't holding on to. I would have glimpses of that, or more than glimpses. I would have times of that,
mhm,
but I felt pretty powerless through a lot of my journey, and I kept having to go back to, I am personally empowered, and I had to do a lot of empowerment work. But when I wrote the book, something shifted in me dramatically, and I became so empowered in my truth, in
wow,
my story, in my being, that nothing rocks it. Literally, nothing rocks it. If
wow,
someone says something negative to me, well, I feel very sad for you that you have to feel that way, but I honor it.
mhm,
I don't have to take it in. I'm a different human because of writing the book.
yeah. And maybe sometimes when we go through things, we're able to really understand how strong we are inside. And I don't know if you have your book in front of you just to show our YouTube videos, but certainly would recommend checking out Susan's incredible book, Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, Susan Grau, available, I'm sure, on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and
Anywhere, Hay House or Penguin Random House.
Hay House.
Um, yes. See the dots, the lights? Those were the 3 lights I
Oh
saw in with
my
the pyramid.
god. Wow,
Yeah.
wow. So it's really and I think what a lot of NDErs, and you correct me if I'm wrong, have a hard time doing is processing what happened in words. And I think what you did was great because from one therapist to another, when we have traumatic events, what we try to help clients to do is to do something called narrative therapy, which is really not allowing ourselves to be defined by what happened to us, but to define it. And it seemed like that was, certainly changing for you, in writing your book. And I'm wondering for
Yeah.
people who may be listening who might have gone through some degree of abuse or trauma, is there something that you've learned from your own experience, that might be able to speak to someone who's just feeling very disempowered and maybe angry and just quite, frazzled as to, with whatever happened to them that was trauma laden.
I'm not foreign to trauma. My whole life was traumatic, quite honestly. I was trafficked as a child. Both my brothers and my mother left by suicide.
Wow.
I had trauma throughout my whole journey, and I became more because of it, not in spite of it, because I made that choice, and it was very, very hard.
Mhm.
I don't minimize trauma at all, and I don't minimize what we have to go through to get to the other side, but there is another side. And if we just are willing to make that a possibility, we can create it. But we have to get rid of our limiting beliefs that we are strong enough to heal.
Mhm.
And grief is far from foreign to me. And it's the hardest thing I see, especially parents who lose their children. I watched my mother experience it twice.
Wow.
And I say to people, you have everything inside of you that was delivered to you through the spirit world to survive anything you need to survive if you just don't limit yourself.
Hmm.
And whatever you feel, it's okay to feel. And whatever experience you have to go through to get to the other side is acceptable.
Hmm.
No one knows you but you and spirit. And however you need to seat into it is
Mhm.
okay. And I say we cannot judge or measure grief no more than we can measure love. So don't judge your grief. Don't judge your pain. Don't judge your trauma. Let it be what it is and walk through it because there's no other choice but to walk through it or leave. And leaving is not the answer. And it's not a necessary answer. I know this from seeing this happen in my own world.
Yeah.
It's not, because there is some other place you can reach to, and it
Mhm.
will come to you when you're ready for that to come, and just allow yourself to just be where you are.
Wow. Hmm. Is that in a way I hear the term surrender, you know discussed a lot when it comes to NDEs. Would you say that surrender is very powerful for people to really tap into spirit and, what unfolded and that was
Yeah, I think it starts with the acceptance part, you
acceptance?
know, accepting that we are beings that are going to go through experiences we don't want to go through, and that it's real, because we want to deny our pain. And
Mhm.
we need to know that our pain is real and it's tangible. No one understands it. So, when you have suicide, very unfortunately, everyone backs away as though they're afraid of you because they don't know how to handle it. And so you feel lonely, and it's grief is lonely. Grief is singular.
Mhm.
And when we know that, we're not looking for someone to fix us, but we're going internal. We're going inside to heal, because that's where the healing is. And I want to say this to people: your soul feels the pain, but your soul is never damaged. If your soul was damaged, where would you go? Where would I go? If your soul was damaged and my soul was damaged, there'd be nowhere to turn for healing. Your soul is the greatest gift you have. It is divine to the divine, and it will connect you to healing faster than anything you have outside of you. So go inward and experience and share that inward place with others that are also trying to heal that part of them, because soul is powerful. It is the most powerful mechanism for healing that you have.
Hmm. Wow, mic drop right there. That's profound, but the solution is the solution as you were saying, right? You would say.
Yes, I love that. Yes. That's
It's
it.
beautiful.
And we don't know that when we're in pain, because we're not tapped into our soul. We're tapped into our heart space. And our heart space can be broken. People die from broken hearts.
Mhm.
The body, the mind, and the heart are part of our human experience in order to heal. But the parts inside the heart, that where the soul seats,
Mm.
is where the power lies. And as I look back on the experiences I've had and the losses I've had, I can see how I didn't feel that I would ever survive. When my mother left by suicide, I thought I was going to die. I couldn't go through it again. And I remember dropping to my knees, and I thought, I'm done. I'll never get up. I can't get up.
Mm.
The pain was so excruciating because it brought all of it came tumbling at once. All of the previous, I have five death by suicides in my life.
Wow.
And I have to say, it all came in tumbling at once. And um, I remember putting my arms around, knowing my soul had the ability to heal me, knowing it, just making it the possibility of knowing. I wrapped my arms around myself and I rocked myself back and forth, and I kept
Mm.
saying, I know you love me more than anything. I know you love me more than anything. I was speaking to myself, I was
Mhm.
speaking to the spirit world, and I was speaking to my soul. And
Mhm.
I felt this rush of surrender and acceptance. This rush came into me of love that I felt when I was there for the
Mhm.
first time. And it was so healing. And I was able to get up and experience the journey of being present in the moments of my pain.
Hmm.
I wanted to run from it. It chased me, just like they said. I wanted to control it, so it controlled me. If you
Mhm.
just allow yourself to be, you can move through it in some way of making it integrated into your journey.
Mhm.
Um, you will never be the same, but you can integrate it and you can still be in life by doing that.
Wow. I am rarely out of words, but at this moment, I don't know if I could possibly say a word right now. You've left me speechless. My God, these are such profound, beautiful, and lived words. And I'm encourage my viewers to keep on coming back to this dialogue conversation. Do you consider your NDE as a form of a microcosm of your life in a sense that it was a dance of great pain and turmoil and also resolve, resilience, and thriving in a way? Because it seemed like once you got out of heaven, you were back down and there was suffering, but then you were able to
Mm,
transcend it. Was that a little bit, allegorical? What happened to you in
absolutely.
your NDE for the life that you lived?
Absolutely. I think, oh, there we are. There's that aha moment for me again. I say this, when this happens, it's like, here it is again.
Mhm.
That was what was changing. That's what changed me from that experience was that I was able to survive
Mhm.
and see it in a different light and be able to teach it. So
Mhm.
I work with grief every day as a medium.
Wow.
And I do grief therapy. So I work with it every day and I tell people the truth of grief is it's a monster and it's in the corner doing push-ups waiting for you to be vulnerable. And
Mhm.
there you are in the grocery store thinking everything's okay and the flood comes and you don't know why and I tell you why because you're grieving. You don't know what's wrong. You say to me, "What's wrong with me, Susan? What's wrong with me?" And I say, "There's nothing wrong with you. You're grieving." And I bring you back to that space of remembering that this is not outside of you. It's not something that's beating on you from outside. It's internal and it has a name, and it's called grief. And
Mhm.
when you know it has a name, you can name it and claim it instead of running from it because it is chasing you. It's in the corner doing push ups. It's not going away. It is going to integrate because you get stronger and stronger and stronger as you're healing from it. So it can integrate instead of owning you. But right now, in the midst of it, it's owning you.
Mm.
Let it. Don't fight it. Let it be what it is. Again, let it be. That's what I learned from my experience of grief and pain and my being in that
Mhm.
place on the other side.
Wow. And that is so true, and I'm sure you listened to the powerful work of David Kessler from the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation, who's, one of the foremost grief experts, and he shares exactly what you were saying, where in order to really heal, you have to feel, your grief, but that grief takes you from there's a river of grief where it takes you from great pain or agony to finding potential meaning and purpose, and the ability to relate to others and to be more compassionate, empathic, and it's there for a reason. These things aren't just random
Mhm.
responses. We've had thousands of losses before us. We'll have more coming, and so we have an awareness as to handle these things. And as you said, really just allow yourself to trust what's inside of you, and just the DNA that we're all hardwired to process some of these things.
Yes. And we're hardwired to find the solution, and we
Mhm.
don't know that. To find the answer, it's part of our being.
Yeah.
And I actually did a mama's grief retreat with David,
Yeah.
and
He's amazing.
yeah, it was very interesting and very profound to watch his work. I have a lot of respect for people who help and volunteer to help anyway, it's
Yeah.
just amazing to me. Um, but for me, it's that knowing that we are enough in and of ourselves to heal. Know that. Know that, people out there that are listening, you have everything you need to heal your pain. You're just not aware of that yet. And if you are aware, you may not know where to find it. It will come to you as you walk the journey of healing. You don't have to find it. It'll come. People are always, "What do I do? What do I do?" You do nothing. Just be right where you are. Be present. Life is in session. Be present in the moment, and the healing will come to you when
Mhm.
your soul says, "I surrender to it."
Yeah. I love it. My my final question is, have you ever taken a step back and wondered, why me? Why did I go through my NDE or all these experiences? Do you feel it was maybe related to a potential past life? Because we're maybe around 10 to 15% of the population. It's a very, and as medicine is enhancing, that incubational period is increasing. But have you ever wondered, or gotten clarity as to why you went through, these things
I
with.
felt the why me's in my pity pot, and I've also felt the why me's in what's my purpose.
Mhm,
I know today that everything I experienced was made for me, and
mhm,
I created that whatever I needed to go through it, not necessarily the exact thing, but definitely grief was part of my process in order to help others. I don't believe that if we haven't experienced it, we can, in some form, that we can be of service in the right way necessarily. I know book study, I've done it. And that doesn't mean um, that we have to go through the loss by suicide. That doesn't mean that, but certainly it's empowering to know that you're sitting with someone who's experienced these experiences. What do we do when we're good therapists? We say to a mother that's lost a child, if we haven't, there's groups for you to attend where they had the same loss you had. Not because we can't relate in some way to loss, but because we know that there's a camaraderie in the
mhm,
similarity of experiences. So for me, I think that I have so many people who have that kind of loss. I have an uncle who was murdered. I was going to marry him. He was the love of my life. So when someone comes to me and says, our child or my husband or whatever it is was murdered or my family member, I am able to understand that initial reaction and that initial shock of that and what that feels like out in the world. Because truthfully, when you tell someone you've had all these suicides, there's an immediate judgment, and I
mhm,
know that. And
yeah,
I always held back because I knew that they would say, "What kind of family did she come from?" And, I had a good
mhm,
family. What is this about? And boy, she must be damaged. These were the thoughts I thought people were having when I really realized writing my book was that those were my thoughts.
mm,
And there's the shift. So, but I'm able to connect into people and help them with my own experience, not just my knowledge, but my experiences, not transferring that onto me. That's not what that's about. But knowing where they were at any given moment when they would share it, go, "Oh, yes, I remember that moment, that aha moment, or that clarity moment, or that loss moment, or that I want to die moment." And I knew what I needed, and so I try to give similarities to that. So I think it was why me. I was a long way around what you asked me, but why me was because I was meant to help others.
mhm, yeah, yeah, and just from seeing you, hearing you, knowing you, I could certainly tell you're a definite angel and a definite spirit guide living.
Oh,
You're like a living spirit guide, and, I think all that you went through, once you cross over again and hopefully down the road, I'm sure you're going to have a big party with everyone celebrating your resilience, your resolve, and how many souls you've been able to help by really acing every test that has come your way. And I'm so thankful for being able to hear your story, to know you, and to be so inspired by the, soul that you continue to evolve and morph into. It's beyond words. Um,
Thank
Susan,
you.
uh, thank you. Um, any final messages for viewers, as well as any what and this will be, dropped in the show notes as well, but any of the best ways for people to reach you, or any promotion, any events coming, around the corner, when this episode drops, and, for people who maybe want, a reading, or to buy your book, or to just, maybe ask a question, or to relate to some of the powerful words that you shared today, where could people find you?
They can find me at Susan Grau Official on all social media. SusanGraw.com is where my website is. I have a subscriber site that it was just released, and it is phenomenal. Yeah, and I'll be on there, and all the things we're talking about right now are on there. I mean,
Mhm,
it's in depth. It's in depth.
mhm,
Um, and I'll be going on and helping and answering questions for people about their journey and what's
mhm,
happening to them and help people. That's what I'm there to do. Um, in helping others, we help ourselves, right? We hear the
mhm,
words we need to hear, right? Um, I would say this the book, Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, what it's titled, the subtitle is Wisdom from the Spirit World on Living, Dying, and the In Between. And that's what we need to understand. And there's so much to relating to the spirit world and allowing them in and accepting them in. And the book is all about my journey, but it's also all about the journey of everyone
mhm,
and how to do that, how to connect in. And if you're wondering why you're not hearing messages, this is my final message. If you're not hearing messages from your loved ones, um, if you can just be present. So when my students come to me, I teach metaphysics, and when my students come to me, I say to them, "What color were the flowers that you walked by on your way to my office?" And their jaws drop, all of them. I never have had anyone say, "Oh, I can tell you." And I say, if you're not present to see what you're passing and what's around you, how will you know when your loved one's trying to give you a message?
mm,
So be present, be present. And when you want to speak to them, sit with your presence, with yourself, your internal self, and witness what you're feeling and experiencing. And that's what I teach in my book is how to connect in, how to know where are they? Biggest question I get, where are they?
mm.
And the book talks all about that and understanding not only from my experience of seeing where they are, but connecting in enough to know that they're right beside you on a higher vibrational level. I have a story of the sloth, the bird, and the sloth, the butterfly, and the hummingbird, and it's in my book. And I know we're out of time, but please, read about that. I talk about it on other podcasts. It's extremely powerful, and it will help you understand why in grief you're not feeling the experience of your loved one and the presence of them.
Susan Gra, I couldn't thank you enough for every word that you said, and I know so many of my viewers will get so much of this conversation that covered so much ground, from your NDE, to your personal experiences, to tools, to connecting to spirit, to engagement with pain, grief, and yes, loss and suicide, and more. This was one of the more comprehensive conversations, and informative and uplifting conversation I've been a part of. I couldn't thank you
Thank
enough,
you.
and whenever you wanna come on, please just let me know. We want you to come back here again.
Oh, I would love to. There's so much more to the journey of could share, and I would love that. Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Well, that was a wonderful conversation with Susan. Hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. Please consider checking out Susan's sites, as well as following her on social media, and checking out her book and all of her upcoming projects, to come. And thank you all for tuning. This was a wonderful conversation that I was able to get so much out of. Thank you for tuning in, and let's continue to ascend and climb the eternal ladder here together on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Thank you.